Maybe you just clicked out of curiosity, or maybe, without even knowing, you were looking for a quieter place, where words come slowly and silence is part of the conversation. I wrote this story gently, like stitching together memories, questions, and old wounds, hoping that somewhere in the seams, you might see yourself too. If that happens, even for a moment, stay. Listen for as long as you'd like. And if something speaks to you, leave a trace. A simple, "I'm here" in the comments can mean more than you think. If you feel like it, share this with someone who needs it. And if you want to come back again, you know what to do. There's a photo that still hangs in my parents' living room. It's framed in dark mahogany, perfectly centered above the fireplace. My dad had it professionally taken when I was about 10. Everyone's in it: Mom, Dad, my little sister Claire, even the golden retriever we had back then, Duke. All smiling in matching blue sweaters, posed like we were some kind of ad for suburban happiness. Except, I'm not in it. Literally. I'm not cropped out or standing behind someone. I'm just not there. That photo used to haunt me. As a kid, I used to tell myself I must have been sick that day, or maybe at a sleepover. I even asked my mom once why I wasn't in it. She blinked at me and said, "Are you sure you weren't?" As if I had misremembered my own absence. Then she waved it off. "Oh, maybe you were being moody again. You had that phase." A phase. I was 10. Growing up as the middle child in a family that openly adored the youngest and tolerated the oldest was like living in a house where the spotlight had blind spots. Claire was the baby, the miracle girl who got the pony, the solo recitals, the she's going places speeches. My brother Scott was the golden boy, football team captain, accepted into Duke on early admission, full ride. And me? I was the kid who made honor roll every semester, but didn't get a congrats dinner. The one who spent birthdays eating store-brand cake at a friend's house because things were tight this year. The one who sat in the back seat, center, no window, no leg room. At family dinners, I was the one setting the table while my siblings talked about their plans and dreams. I was the listener, the default photographer, the one holding the camera, never in front of it. I remember once, in 5th grade, I won a regional spelling bee, first place out of 200 kids. I ran home clutching that little trophy like it was an Oscar. Mom was making lasagna, and I interrupted her, grinning ear to ear. She looked at me and said, "You didn't miss math class for this, did you?" That was it. No good job, no proud hug, just a passive-aggressive dig and back to the cheese layer. Looking back, I don't think they hated me. I think they genuinely didn't see me. Not in the cruel, intentional way. More like the way you forget a coat you haven't worn in years. You don't throw it out. You just stop noticing it's in the closet. But you know who did notice? Me. Every missed hug. Every photo I took, but never appeared in. Every, "We're so proud of you, Claire," that echoed just loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. It all stacked up like unpaid emotional debt. I used to think maybe it was my fault. Maybe I was just hard to love, too quiet, too independent. Maybe if I joined a sport, or wore makeup like Claire, or acted more girly, they'd pay attention. So I tried. God, I tried. I joined track. Quit 2 weeks later, nobody noticed. Started playing piano. Claire got the solo. Baked a cake for Mom's birthday. She thought it was from Scott's girlfriend. By the time I left for college, I didn't cry. I felt relief, like someone just opened the window after years of stale air. But even then, some part of me held on to hope. Hope that one day they'd see me. Not just as the one who quietly left, but as someone who mattered. That's why when Thanksgiving came around this year, and for the first time in 12 years, my parents said yes to coming to my house. I thought, Maybe, just maybe, this would be it. My moment, my photo, my seat at the table. But what happened next shattered whatever little hope I had left, and it started with a laugh, a joke at my expense, and a sentence I'll never forget, because my sons heard it too. This year, Thanksgiving fell on November 24th. Same day my twin boys turned 8. It was the kind of coincidence that made me feel oddly optimistic, like maybe for once, something in life was aligning on its own. I'd never hosted Thanksgiving before, not once. In 12 years of marriage and 2 different homes, my parents had never accepted a single invitation. There was always an excuse, a cruise, a cold, a maybe next year that aged worse than the canned cranberry sauce. But this time, they said yes. It started with a casual text from Mom in early October. "Are you hosting again this year?" I remember rereading it 5 times, trying to figure out the tone. Was she genuinely asking? Or laying the groundwork for another polite decline? I answered, "We are. Would love to have you." 2 days later, she replied, "We'll come, as long as Claire and Mason are invited too." Claire was my sister. Mason was her fiancé. Of course they were invited. I wasn't about to exclude them, no matter how much I still carried the sting of their dismissive smiles from the last family reunion. Still, when I put my phone down, I actually felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. The house buzzed with preparations. Ethan, my husband, took the lead on cleaning. He waged war on the windows like they'd insulted his mother, and even steam cleaned the carpets, something I didn't know we owned a machine for. Jack and Liam were beyond excited. Not just for Thanksgiving, but because they didn't know about the other surprise. See, ever since they were toddlers, I'd tried to separate their birthdays from the holiday. It always felt unfair to have your big day absorbed by turkey and stuffing. So, I kept a tradition. The night before Thanksgiving, we'd do a quiet little celebration. Balloons in the living room, pancakes shaped like 8s, and a small gift each. But this year, I wanted more for them. So I ordered a custom cake from their favorite bakery. Chocolate fudge, baseball themed. Their names in frosting. Happy 8th, Jack and Liam. I planned to bring it out after dinner, with candles and applause, and the kind of attention I used to dream about as a kid. Because that's what I wanted them to remember. Not how Grandma called Mom the forgettable one. Not how Claire always got the spotlight. I wanted them to remember our home, lit with warmth and pie and love that felt earned, not performed. Still, I couldn't ignore the tight knot in my stomach as Thanksgiving crept closer. I kept thinking back to that photo, the one above my parents' fireplace, the one where I wasn't invited. What if this dinner turned out the same way? What if, even after all these years, I still didn't fit in the frame? The night before Thanksgiving, I sat at the dining room table after the kids had gone to bed. The place settings were done, candles ready, napkins folded. The name cards, handmade by Jack and Liam, were taped neatly to each plate. They'd drawn little turkeys next to each name. Mine had a smiley face. Claire's had a crown. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and looked around the house. It wasn't big. It wasn't magazine-worthy, but it was ours. The walls were lined with crayon drawings, not designer prints. The couch had juice stains I'd given up on scrubbing. The table was scuffed from science projects and Lego builds. But to me, it was perfect, because it held everything I'd built, with love and without the need to be seen by people who never looked. And yet, I still invited them. Why? Because deep down, I wanted to believe people could change. That maybe becoming a mother herself had softened my mom. That maybe Claire's new life with Mason had matured her. That maybe, just maybe, they'd show up, Not just physically, but emotionally present. Not for me, but for Jack, for Liam, so they'd know they were part of a family, even a flawed one. That night, I placed the cake in the fridge with a little note taped to it. Don't forget to make a wish. I didn't know then that the wish I had in mind was about to be broken, not by fate, but by the very people I was still trying to believe in. The doorbell rang at exactly 2:04 p.m. Not that I was watching the clock, but I'd been standing in the kitchen, hands still covered in sweet potato mash, when Ethan called out, "They're here." I wiped my hands on a towel and took a breath. You know that thing your chest does when you're hoping this time will be different, even though your gut already knows better? That's what my lungs were doing. Half breaths, cautious optimism, rehearsed smiles. I opened the door, and there they were. My mom in a camel-colored wool coat and oversized sunglasses, looking like she'd just stepped out of a Saks Fifth Avenue catalog, only colder. My dad, trailing behind her, already scowling at the walkway like the cracks in our pavement were a personal insult. And Claire, heels clicking up the steps, dressed like Thanksgiving was a red carpet event. No one said hi. No one smiled. Claire's eyes skimmed the entryway. She did that thing she always did. Tilted her head slightly, squinting just enough to let you know something wasn't good enough. "Oh, it's cozy," she said flatly, stepping inside. Mom nodded in agreement. Like one of those little Airbnbs people rent in rural towns. Very humble. I forced a smile. "Welcome. Dinner will be ready soon." Jack and Liam made place cards. "You're at the head of the table." Dad walked in without taking off his shoes. Mud trailed behind him. "Where's the thermostat? It's freezing in here." He started fiddling with the wall unit before I could answer. I glanced at Ethan across the room. He was holding a tray of deviled eggs, lips pressed into a thin, neutral line. We'd agreed. Don't engage, don't take the bait, just get through the day. Claire strutted toward the dining room, heels tapping against the hardwood floor like a metronome of disdain. She paused at the table, lips pursed. "Are those paper turkeys?" she asked. I nodded. "Jack and Liam made them. That one has your name on it." She picked it up with 2 fingers like it might stain her nails. "Well, that's festive." Mom peeked into the kitchen and frowned at the open shelving. "You don't have upper cabinets?" "No," I said. "We wanted it to feel open." She hummed, which in my family was code for mistake. Dad settled onto the couch and turned on the football game. "Is this a 42-inch? Thought you'd have upgraded by now?" I clenched my jaw and smiled through it. Every jab, every sideways glance, every not-so-subtle comparison to the Pinterest-perfect world they thought Claire embodied. I had expected this, but I hadn't expected how quietly it would hurt. Not like a slap, more like a leak, slow, constant, draining. The boys ran into the room, excited to show off the turkey centerpieces they made with construction paper and googly eyes. "Grandma, look, I made one for you and Grandpa." Mom glanced at the centerpiece and smiled, at the boys, not at the craft. "Well, aren't you creative?" she said, her voice glazed in condescension. Claire leaned over to Liam and whispered, "Did you help Mommy decorate too?" When he nodded, proud as ever, she chuckled and said, "Thought so." He didn't understand the dig, but I did. Still, I kept smiling, because that's what I'd learned to do. You smile to survive. You host, you pour wine, you make sure the stuffing is moist and the seating chart avoids civil war. You hold your breath in your own house. But deep down, something shifted. Maybe it was the way Jack's eyes flicked toward me when Claire laughed. Maybe it was how Liam sat a little quieter than usual after Grandma dismissed his turkey drawing. Or maybe it was just the culmination of years of trying to earn a seat at a table I had already built with my own damn hands. For now, I played the gracious host. But something sharp and steady was taking shape beneath the surface, like a tectonic plate inching toward the inevitable quake. And it was only 2:17 p.m. Thanksgiving dinner wasn't for another hour, but the house already smelled like warmth, cinnamon, roasted garlic, buttered rolls in the oven. Jack and Liam had been whispering excitedly all morning, their little shoes squeaking across the hardwood as they scurried around, Operation Birthday Surprise. They thought they were being subtle. They weren't, and I let them believe they were getting away with it. Around 3:30, while my parents were arguing over which wine went better with turkey, and Claire was giving Ethan unsolicited tips on table symmetry, the boys disappeared into the garage fridge. I watched from the kitchen as they came back, carefully balancing the box between them, proud little faces glowing with anticipation. The cake wasn't fancy. It was a sheet cake we'd bought from Miller's Bakery down the road, a place that knew their names and always added extra frosting when I told them it was for the twins. Jack and Liam had insisted on decorating it themselves. The result? A chocolate-frosted masterpiece with slanted letters that read, "Happy Birthday, Jack and Liam." One balloon drawn in blue, one in green, a lopsided smiley face in the corner. The kind of thing you don't fix. Not because you can't, but because they did it themselves. That's what made it perfect. They were about to bring it to the counter when Claire walked in. She had a wine glass in one hand, her phone in the other, not even looking up until she nearly bumped into them. "Whoa, what is that?" Jack looked up, grinning. "It's our birthday cake. We decorated it." Claire paused, blinked, tilted her head. "That's a cake? God, it looks like something a toddler made with Play-Doh." She laughed. Not playfully, not teasing, mocking. Jack's smile faltered. Liam looked at the cake, then back at her. And then, before I could move, before I could say a word, Claire grabbed the box from their hands, opened the trash can, and dumped the whole thing in. Just like that. Frosting smeared against the inside wall of the bin. The balloon face crumpled. The letters, misspelled but full of love, smushed into nothing. "Don't worry," she said, sipping her wine. "There'll be a real dessert later." I stood in the kitchen doorway. I didn't shout. I didn't storm in. I just froze. Something inside me cracked in silence. No sound, no visible break. Just a clean, cold snap. I met Claire's eyes across the room. She shrugged and said, "What? You were going to serve that?" Liam bent down, peeking into the trash. "Is it ruined?" he whispered. Jack didn't say anything. He just stood there, his little fists clenched at his sides. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the trash can and dump it on the dining table. I wanted to chase Claire down and ask her how the hell someone could look at an 8-year-old's birthday cake and think humiliation was the right response. But I didn't. Because Thanksgiving was still going. Because my parents were in the other room. Because part of me, the part still trained to keep the peace, thought, "Don't make a scene. It'll ruin the boys' day." So instead, I knelt down beside them. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I said, brushing frosting off Liam's sleeve. "You both did an amazing job. It was the best cake I've ever seen." Liam nodded slowly. Jack's face stayed blank. That was the moment. Not the insults, not the furniture judgment, not even the dog bowl thing that would come later. That moment, watching my sons realize someone could laugh at something they were proud of, was when I knew. This wasn't just a bad family dynamic. This wasn't about awkward holidays or Claire being Claire. It was about poison. And I had invited it into my home, for their sake, for my own peace. But now, it had crossed a line. I stood up slowly, took a breath, and for the first time that day, I didn't feel small. I felt still, cold, focused. There wouldn't be another apology. There wouldn't be a birthday redo. But there would be consequences. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked back toward the dining room. I had a table to set, a decision to make. And I knew exactly where the next course would be served. Dinner was served at 4 p.m. sharp. The table was beautiful. Candles flickered softly against the autumn garland I'd spent 2 hours weaving. Plates gleamed under the warm light, and each seat had a hand-drawn place card in Jack and Liam's handwriting, even for the guests who didn't deserve them. I had gone all in. Every dish was homemade. The turkey was perfectly brined. The cranberry sauce wasn't from a can. Ethan poured the wine, and I watched him give me a subtle nod like, "We did it. You made this beautiful." And for one fleeting second, I believed maybe, just maybe, this could still turn out okay. That second didn't last. We had just passed the mashed potatoes when my mother looked at the empty spot between the twins. It was where the cake had been. The boys had asked me quietly if they could leave it empty. "For the surprise that's gone," Jack had whispered. My mom squinted, then looked around. "Are we sitting with the kids?" Her voice wasn't confused. It was offended. Claire smirked. "Guess there's no grown-up table in this Airbnb." My dad chuckled, his lazy, familiar scoff of approval. Then my mom muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Unwanted ones always end up alone." I froze. The knife in my hand hovered above the stuffing. The air left my chest in a quiet whoosh, like someone had pulled a plug inside me. Nobody moved. Ethan shifted beside me, and under the table, his hand closed around mine, tight. His grip said everything he didn't out loud. I heard it. "You're not crazy. I'm right here." But it was Jack who broke the silence. He looked at me, confused. "Mom, what does unwanted mean?" Then he glanced across the table at Claire. "And why did she call you the family shadow?" Claire burst into laughter, full volume, like this was her big moment on a comedy stage. "Oh my God, he remembers that?" "That's what we used to call your mom growing up. She was always just there, quiet, broody, creeping around like a little shadow." She looked to my parents, hoping they'd join in. They did. My dad chuckled again. My mom sipped her wine and said, "Well, it wasn't mean. It was accurate." I stood up slowly. Not angrily, not dramatically. I just stood, because sitting in that chair felt impossible. I looked down at my sons, both of them now wide-eyed and silent. Jack's shoulders were stiff. Liam looked like he was trying to disappear into his napkin. "Excuse me?" I said, and walked out of the room. Not a slam, not a scene, just silence. In the kitchen, I braced myself against the counter, hands gripping the edge until my knuckles turned white. No tears. Not yet, just the memory of decades unraveling in reverse. My 13th birthday party no one showed up for. The time I broke my arm, and Mom called it drama. When I got my first promotion, and they congratulated Claire for booking a trip to Italy in the same breath. And now? Now they did it in front of my children. You know what's worse than being overlooked? Being laughed at. In front of the only people who think you hang the moon. And yet, even in that moment, I hesitated. I stared at the fridge door where the cake used to sit. I looked down at the floor where frosting had dripped after Claire dumped it, and I heard my mother's voice in my head again. Unwanted ones always end up alone. Except, what if she was wrong? What if I wasn't the one who was unwanted? What if they were just incapable of loving anyone who didn't fit their mold? The timer dinged. The rolls were done. I took a deep breath straightened my back, and began to plate the next course, very carefully, but not onto my grandmother's china. This time, I reached under the sink and pulled out the stainless steel bowls we used to feed Duke, our golden retriever, long gone, but not forgotten. I smiled, not cruelly, just finally. Finally done hoping. Butch was our golden retriever growing up. He lived 13 years, mostly ignored by my parents, but adored by us kids, especially me. He was loyal, gentle, never raised his voice or asked for praise, just followed you room to room like he wanted to make sure you weren't alone. When he passed, I kept his bowls. Stainless steel, heavy, slightly dented at the rim from where he used to nose them when dinner was late. One still had his name on it, a piece of white label tape, faded now, but legible. Butch. I'd shoved them under the sink in this house, figuring I'd toss them eventually. But I never did. Maybe I understood something, even then. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the scent of food no one deserved. My hands were steady, calmer than they had any right to be. I took a serving spoon, scooped mashed potatoes, perfectly whipped, still warm, carved 2 thick slices of turkey, a spoonful of stuffing, cranberry sauce shaped just right, all of it, lovingly, deliberately, into the dog bowls. And as I filled the second one, the label facing me like a mirror, I whispered under my breath, "Not everyone deserves fine china." I walked slowly back into the dining room. The house had gone strangely quiet. You could hear the football game murmuring in the background, the low hum of the fridge. Ethan glanced up first. He knew. He didn't say a word, just gave me the smallest nod. Claire was too busy scrolling through her phone to notice. My parents were still seated at the table, wine glasses half full, waiting to be served. Like royalty, waiting for their footman. I started with my mother. I placed the bowl in front of her with both hands, gently. She blinked, looked down. The stainless steel caught the light. "What is this?" she asked, her voice pinched. Before she could finish, I placed the second bowl in front of my father. He leaned back, confused, squinting at it like I'd just handed him roadkill. "Natalie, what the hell is this?" I turned to Claire and Mason, still holding 2 porcelain plates. "Don't worry," I said calmly. "You're still guests. Guests get the good dishes." Then I looked back at my parents. But for those who treat others like dogs, well, I figured they'd feel more at home eating from a dog's bowl. Claire snorted. "Are you serious right now?" Mom's face turned to stone. Dad's eyes narrowed. "You're humiliating us," she hissed. I shrugged. "Oh, so you know what humiliation feels like?" Under the table, I saw Jack and Liam glance at each other. They weren't scared. They were watching, processing. Ethan stood up quietly and leaned down to them. "Boys, let's go play in the den," he said softly. "Mom needs a minute." They left without a word, and once they were gone, I straightened up fully. "You came into my house," I said, voice low, firm. "You mocked my home, insulted my sons, called me unwanted in front of them, and laughed about it. You treated a birthday cake like trash, and your own daughter like a joke. So no, you don't get my grandmother's china tonight. You get Butch's bowl. Because for once in your lives, you're going to sit in what you created." My father pushed his chair back sharply. It screeched across the floor. "This is pathetic," he spat. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, my voice ice. "I was dramatic when I cried alone at 13 because you forgot my birthday. This question mark? This is clarity." My mom shook her head. "We raised you better than this." "No, you didn't," I snapped. "You raised me to believe that my worth depended on how much I tolerated. And I'm done." The room fell into silence. They didn't touch the food. I didn't offer them anything else. And when I finally sat back down, I felt something in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Control. Not the controlling kind that chokes. The kind that says, you are no longer helpless. You are no longer invisible. You are done shrinking to make them comfortable. I reached for my wine, took a sip, and for the first time in that dining room, I tasted peace. My parents didn't speak for a full minute after I placed the dog bowls in front of them. My mother stared into hers like she expected it to vanish. My father's jaw ticked like a man deciding between walking out and flipping the table. Claire was already texting under the table, probably relaying the scandal in real time to one of her friends. Mason looked like he wanted to disappear into his wine glass. The silence was thick. But I wasn't done. I stood again and left the room. No one followed. I returned carrying 3 plain, white envelopes. No names, no decoration. Just heavy. The kind of envelope that doesn't carry apologies, only consequences. I placed one in front of each of them. I was going to wait until after dessert, I said calmly. But I think this is a good time for your retirement gifts. My mother narrowed her eyes. What is this? My father didn't touch the envelope. Natalie, I swear. Open it. They did. First, confusion. Then, dawning recognition. Then, panic. Inside each envelope were certified legal documents. Copies of power of attorney revocations, removal of emergency contacts, and one extra document in my parents', the last will and testament of my grandfather, Arthur Reynolds. The real one. 6 months ago, I'd found it in the back corner of my parents' attic. I was helping them clear out after my mom's minor surgery. She insisted she didn't want Claire climbing the ladder in heels. Go figure. It was tucked inside an old storage box labeled Christmas cards. 2003, inside a manila folder, taped shut. Almost like someone wanted it forgotten. I opened it out of curiosity, maybe even nostalgia. Instead, I found a notarized document dated 10 years ago. It read, in clear ink, I, Arthur Reynolds, being of sound mind and body, leave my remaining estate, assets, properties, and trust accounts, to my granddaughter, Natalie Ann Reynolds. For she has shown character, independence, and integrity beyond her years. She is the future of this family. I remember sitting in that attic, knees against my chest, rereading that paragraph like it would change. My grandfather had chosen me, not Claire, not my parents, me, and they had buried it. Weeks later, I obtained a copy of the version my parents had filed after his death. It listed Claire as the primary heir and my father as trustee. It was altered. They had tampered with the legacy of the one man who ever made me feel truly seen. So I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I got a lawyer. A good one. We ran a quiet, thorough process, challenged the false filing, authenticated the original, and completed all the necessary steps to transfer the remaining assets to their rightful owner. Me. But I didn't stop there, because I didn't want the estate. I wanted it to go to the people who still believed in birthdays and homemade cards and love without strings attached. I placed those assets in a protected trust, under Jack and Liam's names. They didn't know it yet, but someday they would. Back at the table, my father was breathing hard. My mother's hands trembled as she reread the papers. You manipulated this, she spat. You planned this entire stunt. I did, I said. Every word, every step, because you manipulated everything else, including a dying man's wishes. Claire slammed her glass down. You really think this makes you better than us? No, I said. I think it makes me free from you. Mason finally spoke softly. Wait, you put the trust in your kids' names? I nodded. That's right, because they don't just carry my blood, they carry the future. And I'll be damned if they grow up thinking abuse and silence are just part of tradition. My mom started to cry. I didn't comfort her. My dad stood and threw his napkin on the table. You'll regret this. No, I said. I regretted not seeing it sooner. I walked out of the dining room, heart pounding, but not from fear. It was a strange kind of grief, like walking away from something that had already died years ago. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream. But for the first time, I knew. They no longer had anything left to take. Not my dignity, not my story, not even my silence. They left without finishing dinner. No thank yous, no goodbyes, just the sound of the front door closing behind them. Hard, but not slammed, more like a retreat. They didn't take the dog bowls. I left them there overnight. 2 perfectly plated meals, now cold, congealed, and untouched, still sitting in stainless steel under the soft glow of candlelight. It looked almost poetic, like a still life titled Entitlement Served Cold. After Ethan tucked the boys into bed, he came back into the dining room. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. He walked over, picked up one of the bowls, read the faded label, Butch, and gave me a look. The kind that says I get it. Then he whispered, You okay? And for the first time in years, I didn't say, I'm fine. I said, I'm getting there. He nodded. Then he took out the trash. And I washed the good plates, only the ones that had been used. No one called the next day. No, we need to talk. No, maybe we overreacted. No fake peace offerings. Just silence. And honestly, it was disorienting at first. Because when you grow up walking on eggshells, silence doesn't feel like peace. It feels like waiting for the next blow. But nothing came. No passive-aggressive texts. No voicemails. No sudden guilt-tripping from Mom. Just stillness. 3 days later, an email arrived. From Claire. Subject line. You went too far. That's it. No body text, no context, no signature. Just those 4 words. Cold, condensed, brittle. The kind of message people send when they realize the control they once had is gone. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed it. I took the page, trimmed it, and slid it into the corner of a photo frame I kept on the shelf in my office, the one that held a picture of Jack and Liam at age 5, covered in flour, laughing in front of a birthday cake they made with Ethan. The cake had sunk in the middle. The frosting looked like mud. It was perfect. Next to the photo, I placed a new label, Dog Bowl, Services Rendered. A private little trophy. Not for revenge, for survival. I never told the boys the full story behind what happened. Not then, but they knew something changed. The next week, Jack asked, Are we going to Grandma's for Christmas this year? And I said, No, sweetheart. We're staying home. Liam looked up. Are we still a family? I knelt down beside them and pulled them close. We always were, I said. We're just making room for the parts that matter now. It wasn't just the birthday cake that got thrown away that day. It was the part of me that kept hoping they'd change. The part of me that thought if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, gave enough, maybe I'd finally be wanted. But I was never the problem. And the real gift? Realizing that the things they mocked, the messy cake, the homemade decorations, the little turkeys with googly eyes, those were the most real parts of me. Those weren't flaws. They were the evidence of love. And love is never unwanted. 3 weeks later, I was at the corner table in Greystone Coffee, headphones in, working on a branding pitch for a client in Denver. My favorite table, the one near the window, with the view of the courthouse and a decent electrical outlet. The place was quiet, post-holiday lull, a soft hum of espresso machines, the occasional clink of mugs. Exactly what I needed, until I felt a shadow fall over my laptop. I looked up and saw Mr. Ellis. Navy coat, gray beard, the kind of presence that makes a room hush without meaning to. He was the largest real estate developer in the Tri-County area. I'd worked with him on a few high-end marketing campaigns. Brilliant guy. No time for nonsense. "Natalie," he said, tapping a manila folder. "Thought you'd want to see this." I slid off my headphones, curious. "Something wrong with the downtown campaign?" He shook his head. "Not at all. This is unrelated, more personal." That got my attention. He slid the folder across the table. I opened it slowly, like peeling back the first layer of a secret. There it was, a glossy pitch deck. Gold-trimmed title, Mason and Claire Events, Curating Prestige. And right beneath the brand mission, listed under professional references, my name. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Then I saw the photo. Claire, arms crossed, chin lifted, hair blown out in those aspirational curls only stylists and influencers maintain. Her eyes sparkled with the kind of ambition that usually ends in lawsuits. Apparently, she was launching a luxury event planning firm and had used me as her reference. No call, no heads up, no request. Just assumed I'd do what I always did, stay silent. I looked at Mr. Ellis. "She came to you for funding?" He nodded. "Yesterday. Said she wanted to redefine premium experiences in the regional wedding market. Mentioned your name as a creative mentor. Figured I'd run it by you before I waste anyone's time." I smiled. Slowly, not smug, just solid. "I appreciate that. Want to give me a line or two?" I closed the folder, took a sip of coffee, then opened my laptop and typed out the most honest professional reference I'd ever written. Claire Reynolds is photogenic, punctual, and highly persuasive in first impressions. Her work, however, is largely aesthetic, visually impressive, but lacking emotional or strategic depth. If you're looking for Instagram-worthy backdrops and trending color palettes, she's your girl. If you want substance, structure, and brand integrity that lasts longer than a champagne toast, look elsewhere. I didn't ask for updates, but word travels fast in small business circles. 2 weeks later, I heard from a former client that the launch event for Mason and Claire Events had underwhelmed, industry speak for embarrassing. Ellis passed. So did the next 3 major investors. No one wanted to touch it after they heard the biggest player in the region had seen the pitch and walked away. Claire never reached out. She didn't send another email. Didn't post any new chapter updates online. Just faded back into that space where image couldn't save her. And me? I didn't brag, didn't screenshot the email, didn't forward the pitch deck to friends. Because here's the thing. You don't need to raise your voice when the truth has already spoken. You just sip your coffee, finish your presentation, and keep building what they said you never could. In the quiet corner of my office, next to the framed photo of my boys covered in cake batter and the plaque reading, "Dog Bowl Services Rendered," I added one more small thing, a sticky note. Yellow. Plain. Written in my own handwriting. The most powerful revenge is not becoming them. The campaign launched on a Monday morning. We called it Uninvited. Just one word. But it carried everything I'd lived through, everything I'd let go of. The first frame of the video showed a mother sitting alone at a long dinner table, candles burning low, a feast untouched. The camera panned slowly, revealing empty chairs. One of them still had a name card, Another had a child's drawing taped to the back. No narration, just silence. Then a voice, my voice, came in softly, almost like a memory. They told me I wasn't wanted, so I built a life where I was needed. The response was overwhelming. By noon, it had 500,000 views. By the end of the week, it was on every major brand and marketing blog. People shared their own stories. Messages flooded in from mothers, sons, middle daughters who'd spent their lives trying to earn the love of people who only gave conditions. Tears, support, applause. Even Forbes ran a feature. How one woman turned generational pain into the most honest holiday ad of the year. I didn't feel proud. I felt steady, like my voice had finally grown into itself. One afternoon, I came home to a small brown package on the porch. No return address, no markings. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single item, a torn RSVP card, the one I'd mailed weeks before Thanksgiving, with gold trim and cursive script. Across it, scrawled in black marker, "You win." It was Claire's handwriting. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't know what it meant, but because for the first time in my life, I didn't need it to mean anything. I didn't want her apology. I didn't want their regret. And most of all, I didn't want to win. Because this was never a game. Winning is for battles. What I did wasn't about victory. It was about rescue. Rescuing myself. Rescuing my sons from a legacy of silence and sugar-coated cruelty. I tossed the RSVP in the fire that night. No ritual, no hatred, just warmth. A month later, it was Christmas Eve. Snow fell softly outside. Jack and Liam were hanging their handmade ornaments, still lopsided, still perfect. Ethan carved the roast in the kitchen, humming something off-key and festive. The house was lit in gold and quiet laughter. There were no stiff conversations, no passive-aggressive comments, no fake smiles. No one missing in the way that used to ache. Just us, whole. Later that night, after the boys were asleep, I sat by the fire. The stockings hung unevenly. The tree had one side fuller than the other, and the living room smelled like cinnamon, pine, and peace. Ethan sat beside me and asked the same question he always did when he sensed something turning in my chest. "You okay?" I turned to him, and this time, no tears welled. No old echoes answered first. Just me. "I'm better than okay," I whispered. "I finally made room for the right kind of family." He didn't reply. He just reached for my hand, held it quietly. And in the glow of the fire, surrounded by people who didn't tolerate me, but chose me, I finally understood. Being unwanted by the wrong people isn't the end. It's the beginning of becoming irreplaceable to the right ones.